I'm your host for this evening. My name is Nabil. I'm one of the organizers for Essence for Agility Meetup. I will give you guys a quick intro to the Essence for Agility Meetup before we start talking about the event. So Essence for Agility, we're a community that is aimed to explore Essence, as you might have guessed from the name. Essence is a standard which describes practices and methods to better enable us to pick the right set of practices to suit our context, and also so we can improve our application of our agile methods. So that's in a nutshell what our group is about. We host events to explore Essence directly. We also host events on various other topics within the agile and software engineering domain. So tonight we have an exciting event for you. The title of tonight's event is the Spotify model Demystified and Made Applicable. So we'll be learning about not only the Spotify model, but how it has become linked with Essence. We have two lovely guests with us tonight, Joachim Sundin and Stefan Manisch, who I'll be having a little interview with. I'll be asking them some questions to understand some of the work that they've been doing, to understand how Spotify and Essence are coming together. Some ground-keeping rules. Please keep your microphones muted while we're talking to minimize disturbance. Feel free to use the chat system. We'll have an opportunity for an audience Q&A at the end, so we'll try our best to answer your questions. And yeah, I'm going to hand over to Eva, though, who is also kindly joined us. He has a few words to say as well.
Of course. The Spotify model has fascinated a lot of people, including me, since I first saw some videos some years ago. Its beauty was that it, on one hand, was so simple, easy to understand, primarily about some organization patterns such as squad, tribe, etc. And on the other hand, gave a lot of freedom. Any team could select their own method. That is attractive. Sounds really simple. The problem is, where would the team get their method from? The world is full of wisdom, but it's not always easy to get it. If a squad, for instance, wants to use SAFe, it's a major undertaking. Even if just want to use a handful of practices, it's quite a lot of work to compose and get great value out of it. Today, we will hear about how that can be done in an agile, super agile way. I will personally try to stay out of a discussion, but maybe I cannot resist. And now over to the real discussion.
Okay. As usual, feel free to weigh in whenever you feel like, Eva. It is, after all, part of your group as well. I just wanted to also briefly mention that we have Simon with us today, who will be giving us a bit of a demo later on. So more on that too, more on that soon, rather. Okie dokie. Now that we've got the intros out of the way, Joachim and Stefan, would you perhaps like to say a quick word about yourselves, just so the audience can, say hello to you essentially before I just start asking you guys some questions? Maybe Stefan, would you like to go first?
Yes, let me start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stefan Manisch, and I'm focused on software architectures and looking particularly on the change management aspect. And out of that context, I got in contact with Essence, and since then I immersed myself into Essence, and I'm working on several projects where I essentialize practices and methods using Essence. The Spotify Essentials, you will see in a few minutes, is one of these projects, which I conducted jointly with Joachim. And I can also stress, the Spotify model is really a flexible one. We will see that later. And Essence is really a key enabler for that. And therefore, I'm quite excited to present today the Spotify Essentials practice, which we developed together.
Thank you. Joachim.
Hello, everyone. So Joachim Sundén, that's how it's really pronounced, but it's hard for English speakers. Happy to see several familiar faces and even more happy to see a lot of new potential friends, a lot of people participating. So I'm a consultant with CRISP in Stockholm, in Sweden. And right now I'm at a hotel in Copenhagen, but soon home again. I was an agile coach at Spotify from 2011 to 2017, growing from 8 teams to over 200. And I was part of the small group of people who started developing the Spotify model of tribes and squads and chapters and guilds and so on, and co-evolved it over time during my 6.5 years there. And I guess that's about does it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you for correcting my pronunciation. I'll try to get it right. Okay, so first question for you fine gentlemen. We've talked about Spotify Essentials. It was in the meetup description as well. So how did you come up with the idea of developing Spotify Essentials?
Yeah, well, it seemed like a really good fit because one core tenet of Spotify, Spotify's way of working and then Spotify model is that teams have autonomy, or squads as we call them, and should be free to choose their own process. And it actually dates back to, according to Spotify lore, to the day of even before I started, where the company started growing, maybe 30 or 40 developers, and the ad hoc collaboration of a small startup that they had been used to rely on simply didn't cut it when they were growing, and it was becoming chaotic, and people were getting stressed and didn't understand who was doing what, and some people said that if this is going to go on, I'll quit. This is so chaotic. And then Spotify brought in a Scrum trainer for something silly like half a day, and just do this. It's by the book, super prescriptive. You should when you estimate in sprint plannings, you should do a minimum and a maximum and an average, and multiply that by 3 and add the 2 and then divide by 5, and everyone has to do it in the same way. And naturally, a few other people then said, if this is going to go on, I'll quit. And that has become kind of a metaphor story for the constant balancing act of how can we build an agile culture where we don't end up in chaos, so we have enough guidelines, enough common practices and so on, but also don't over constrain people with too much process or too much guidelines. So some started calling this concept a minimum viable bureaucracy, and already in the first squad health check that we ran with the teams as a self-assessment back in 2011, one of the 6 categories for this self-assessment was actually you should have a process that fits the team. And if you had a green light, it was that you have actively optimized the process for your use and continuously are improving your way of working. A red light would be the team doesn't follow any process, and in between was that, we follow a process, but we haven't put much effort into optimizing it for our use. So it was clear to us from the beginning that teams need to take ownership of their way of working, and it needs to be adapted to specify or to fit their specific context and the needs of the squad, and continuously evolve. And no one knows the context better or better shape to decide how they should be working than the team members themselves. So of course, we had a lot of values and principles and culture and training and coaches and management support that would help the teams on this never-ending journey. And we'll hopefully talk more about these later, because the values and principles and culture seems to sometimes be missing from when people adopt the Spotify model. And one thing, however, that was missing was an even better and more structured way of describing what practices were the teams using. So it was easy for teams to just, maybe we split the team into 2 and added some more people, and it was common to just go on as we we used to do in the old team, and maybe not explicitly describing what you were doing, and newcomers wouldn't be sure what was happening. And we found that when you don't have it visualized, when you don't have it written down, it's very difficult to understand how are we working. How can I actually challenge the way we work if we haven't really agreed on how we are doing? And of course, capturing it will also facilitate sharing of knowledge and ideas, so that we can learn and take inspiration from our colleagues and what they discover. So we really try to encourage teams to do that. And some of them did, but unfortunately, many of the teams just didn't capture it. And those who were doing it did it in an ad hoc way, and wasn't easy to share. So when I learned about Essence, that seemed like, really an extension of the exact same idea, that teams should be able to combine different practices. And also now, Essence seems to be a tool that both, describe what are the options, a smorgasbord, to use a Swedish English word, of practices to pick from, and help guide people in what choices are available to us. And then also actually capture and describe it in a way that makes sense for the team, and that they can also share with others in the organization, and show what they're doing.
So maybe from my perspective, I was interested in finding, let's say, the main documentation of the Spotify model when I first got in contact with that. Yeah, and Eva alluded to that. There's a white paper which is outdated. There are some videos of the engineering team, engineering culture, and so on. And there are a lot of blog posts around that. But what I haven't found then so far is really, so where is it documented? So some sort of master documentation. And that also inspired me to get to the roots really of Spotify, and getting to know what is really in here, and maybe also set up some sort of documentation that can be used then to other people to learn about the model, adopt the model, and so on.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So before we go on to more details about the Spotify Essentials, maybe, Joachim, you could tell me what the Spotify model is really about from your perspective, having been inside while it was created.
Yes, as Stefan was saying, it's a pretty loosely defined framework for agile at scale, and of course, Stefan went straight to where's the documentation, what does the framework look like? Did we mention he's a German architect? But it's a reasonable, quest to figure out. Okay, it's very popular. People are raving about it, but what is it? And as he pointed out, the canonical documentation consists mainly of an outdated white paper that clearly says this is only a snapshot of our current way of working. Once you read this, it's already changed from 2012. And it's not really properly describing even the trade-offs that we were making. We still had not figured out what was working and what wasn't. Like, one of the core things with the Spotify model that's others have copied is that, there's a chapter lead, a manager who's 50% of their time an individual contributor, 50% a manager, which makes the dollar signs rotate in people's eyes. And here's some costs to be saved. That's a model for us. But we moved away from that almost immediately because it was very hard to pull that off, to both be a manager and a contributor. So that was a very short time in Spotify's history. And that's what people copy. And then we have the culture videos, really fun and entertaining and nice communication, but it doesn't really say much. And it was captured by a consultant who was just the messenger, according to himself. A very good messenger and a friend and colleague of mine these days as well, Henrik Knieberg. So if you want to learn more than that, you will have to really wade through a vast amount of presentations and articles. And the irony is, of course, that many of them are published by Spotify employees or former Spotify employees like myself, and basically saying there is no Spotify model. Don't copy the Spotify model. Stay away of the Spotify model. You can do better than the Spotify model, which was a talk that I gave. But in spite of this scarcity of even semi-official descriptions and lots of cautionary tales, it continues to appeal to a lot of organizations. And I personally believe I've been running trainings based on the Spotify model that I've co-developed with a colleague across the entire world. I've been to Hong Kong and South Africa and the US and Brazil and met hundreds of people. And I believe that thousands of companies are actually using the Spotify model. And it's been picked up in Gartner and other research that there's a very wide adoption in spite of this scarcity of material and so on. So even if Spotify employees, well, they're pretty silent these days, but even if we kept saying there is no model and you know, de facto, there is a model because thousands of organizations are using it. So let's stop kidding ourselves and instead actually try to help people to understand what it is. And I would love to be able to use Essence to evolve our collective understanding. What do actually people do in the field? How are they applying it? And try to understand how it can be of value. And just to wrap things up, I think that what most people associate with the Spotify model are the structural things, the tribe, the squad, the chapter, the guild. That's easy to understand and grasp. And yeah, we can also do that. We can just start by renaming our teams to squads. Then we're at least apart there. It's easy to just do. But then below the surface, there are a lot of core beliefs and culture and values. And I think that's what we're trying to also add with Essence to really capture not only the easiest and most obvious things that people are doing, but really the fundamentals that can help you get value out of it. And we'll have a look at that in a bit, I hope.
Great, thank you for explaining. Well, since thousands of organizations are using it, even though that wasn't perhaps the intention, since we want to help them with it, Stefan, maybe you could tell us, how does the Spotify model and Essence fit together?
So in a nutshell, Eva and Joachim, they already mentioned that. Yeah. So as the Spotify model is a quite flexible model, yeah, and it really contains this idea that the squad can define its own way of working, and probably you have a set of squads having totally different practices in place. You need something, yeah, you need something to enable those teams, yeah, to do that. And the other perspective of that is what Joachim mentioned, the documentation, yeah, so describing your way of working and so on. And therefore, Essence is the perfect pitch for that, yeah, because Essence defines the common ground, the common language which you can use to describe the Spotify model itself, and of course also other models. And as we will see in a few minutes, a lot of other practices are already available on Essence. As soon as you bring the Spotify model on Essence, you can leverage all the other practices which are in place. And therefore, it is a key enabler really for the Spotify model.
Great, thank you. So why don't we hear more about the Spotify Essentials? Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, and let me briefly share my screen. Hold on a second.
No problem.
So what you see here is an overview of the Spotify Essentials practice which we developed. So Spotify Essentials basically consists of core beliefs, some organizational patterns, and some activities. The core beliefs are classified as core beliefs focusing on the alignment, and the other ones are focusing on the autonomy. And as you can see here in the cards and the logos here, we use the pattern element of Essence to model those core beliefs, yeah, which are kind of guardrails or guiding principles linked to alignment and autonomy. So the alignment ones, they are guiding the way of working. Yeah, that's the Essence Alpha, and the autonomy core beliefs are more guiding the teams and the roles. And the team and the roles are part of the organizational patterns. And here you find, as Joachim just mentioned, a lot of stuff related to the team. So the typical elements, yeah, when talking about the Spotify model, the squad, the tribe, chapter, guilds, and so on. So all those teams are represented as patterns too, and they're refining the team alpha, yeah, because we thought, okay, a squad is typically just a specialization, yeah, of the alpha team and so on. What you also can see here on the cards, we have also elaborated on the structure. Yeah, so the team consists of certain roles, and the role is supporting in various teams, and you can also find that here on the cards. We have modeled that entirely. The roles are the various specific roles defined by the Spotify model, and as I explained before, yeah, there are, let's say, used to define the various teams making up your role structure. And again, you also find then the structure as part of the cards. The third category, we have activities here. Currently, 2 activities focusing on the activity space prepared to do the work. So there is something like a kickstart for a squad, describing how you can ramp up a squad. And there's also something similar for a tribe, describing how you can bring up a tribe to life. And there are 2 more activities focusing on the support the team activity space. So there's a squad health check supporting the team to do some, let's say, retrospective and involvement moving forward. And there is an activity related to the tribe gathering, which is an activity you typically conduct to bring together a tribe. So this is basically an overview of the Spotify Essentials practice. And what we have also developed, to kind of demystify and also make the model more applicable, is another view. Let me move on to the next slide. I will briefly explain the structure of the slide, and then Joachim will elaborate on the contents here. So what you see here is a model we developed to demystify the model and make it more applicable. So you see here, looking at the bottom at the legend, we have again patterns in here, and don't get confused. You now see here just the tokens of the cards. Yeah? So that's a typical way to have a much more abstract graphical version of a card. In addition, you see the activities here. And in the second line, you see a bunch of practices which are rather reused, or can be leveraged when using the Spotify model. You see the color coding here as defined in the standard, the various areas of concern. And we have some other, let's say, guiding principles here, how you can, for example, further define then a tribe leadership team and so on. Now, Joachim can walk us further through the contents and describe how we assigned here the various elements to give some more guidance.
Yeah, so I had a hard time actually, or we had, figuring out how to categorize these different things, because on the one hand, the whole point of the Spotify model is to not prescribe things, and you have to find your own way, and you have to inspect and adapt and figure out what practices work for me. On the other hand, if you are interested in adopting some central parts of the Spotify model, well, then we want to provide guidance for you. What should I be doing? What should I probably start with and do? So the one on the top left is the core structures, I would say, like squad and tribe and chapter and guild and chapter lead. Do I have to use them all if I want to adopt the Spotify model? No, you can probably just pick and choose and go ahead and consciously try to fit them into your context. But these are all what I would consider safe to try and get started with, because what's the point if you're only going to pick a few ones, then it's not really adopting a Spotify model. And but the important part here is to not just be content with the structural organizational things, but really core to the Spotify model are the guided by this, the 5 core beliefs. Based on that, we often talked about core beliefs at Spotify, and we've used kind of Spotify language to make the connection clear. Be autonomous, but don't sub-optimize, which is all about alignment and the leadership and organization, giving teams problems to solve or opportunities to realize, missions, and then it's up to the teams to figure out how do we do that. We're all in this together, emphasizing shared responsibility. How can I help? We're all in this together, not the siloed thinking of not my job, not my responsibility. Strong teams always beat rock stars was an engineering core belief at Spotify, which summarizes the concept of it's a team first approach. That's the central unit of the organization. And empower and trust, of course, captures the autonomy at Spotify, which has also been captured by Marty Kagan and others as empowered product teams, because that's what it's really about. And also the developing products is about developing people. The whole thing that Toyota made very popular with saying, we don't build people, we build people who build cars, or build people who build music streaming services in Spotify's case. And this is kind of the whole point, I would say, of using the Spotify model. These are the beliefs that guided us and to come up with these other things. But beyond that, maybe addition to compared to what most people have just copied, but from what they found in white papers and so on, there are also some more esoteric things in there that we want to capture that I think are really helpful if you want to get up and running with tribes, like the tribe kickstart, the tribe gathering. I don't think that's been documented or talked about that much. How we ran squads kickstarts and the importance of giving teams missions early on and the metrics to follow them up and so on. And then on the other hand, we have consider on the right. Those are more implementations. You should probably have a tribe leadership team, which is in the left, do this. But then exactly how should that look? Who should be part of that? What roles do you have? Well, that's going to be bound to be more context specific. But we have some patterns that we used at Spotify that might be useful for you, but those are implementation details. And then we have the same view on a lot of practices. I mean, Spotify is an agile at scale approach. So there are going to be, product ownership essentials, product management essentials, and agile teaming essentials, and all of those. Those are intimately connected to how we approach things at Spotify. And we've even put the Scrum Accelerator patterns in there, which might seem advanced, but that was kind of things that were expected from squads at Spotify. Being small teams, being stable teams, T-shaped people, and so on. But then on the other hand, we have on the right side, well, we expect teams to use agile methods, but whether that's Kanban or Scrum or using user stories, use cases, again, that's more of implementation details. Things you could consider that would complement and support the elements on the left. But, yeah.
That's fast.
What we have here is the first step, in this direction, demystifying the model, providing some guidance how to use it. And what you see here in the upper half is basically the set of elements as part of Spotify Essentials. And there are other practices which are used in conjunction with the Spotify model. They can be enriching then the Spotify model. And I need to stress what you have seen then so far is the card view on that. And you probably know Essence has more views than that, but we were focusing here on this card view. This model gives you a first support in adopting the model, using which elements should be combined with others. But you can, of course, push that further. So you can use, for example, the cars and the tokens and use them on virtual whiteboards to do exercises, to learn the practice and maybe also to adopt a plan how to evolve towards the Spotify model. And the other end of that is having even specific tools for that. Specific tools which you can leverage to use and compose practices, and bringing out of this model here really something which is specific to an organization and which combines the Spotify model with all the other practices. And for that, we have Simon here, which is principal consultant and agile coach at AGI, and Simon will demo some of the stuff I just mentioned.
Brilliant, thank you, Stefan. Let's get the right screen. So there's a few things I want to share with you, and there'll be some links. So this is where you can start actually using the practice yourself. First, though, we've got a mural board which seeks to address one of the questions that Joachim asked earlier, which is, how do we know what people are actually doing? There's thousands of companies using the Spotify model in one form or another, but how well are they using it? Which bits are they familiar with? How have they customized it themselves? So the point of this board here that I'll share a link to in the chat is to try to capture some of that information from you. So if you're able to jump into the mural at some point, doesn't need to be right now, and have a look at the elements at the top. So if I show you how this mural is set up, we've got the cards are all along the top with the full descriptions, and then there's a set of states that you could be in. You might already be doing that quite well. You might be doing it, but you want to improve a little bit. You might be moving towards it, but you're not there yet. It might be something you want to do, but you haven't started. Or it might be something that you're not intending to do at all. And actually, it might be something which you've never even heard of before. So for the set of the main elements at the top, it'd be really interesting to find out from you where you are on that journey. Are you using it? How's it going for you? Have you got some examples of things that you found work well or things that don't work well? It'll be quite an interesting body of knowledge. It'll be quite useful for us to see a kind of heat map of which practices are more dominant than others and what people think of them. So that's the first little thing I wanted to share with you. And I'm putting a couple of examples, with the post-it notes. I've kept them quite small because, we are an audience today of well over 100. So I thought if we have big post-it notes, we might not get very far. The other thing you'll find on this mural board, but don't worry because I've got a template you can use in a minute, is all the cards. So down here, I've got the cards arranged in 3 different ways. There's a kind of vertical way that's easy to copy, a horizontal way, and then this bit in the middle with the groupings that Joachim and Stefan have described. Also, you've got here, I should have locked that, the references, so you can go and find out a bit more about it. So that's a board that you can play around with. I'll try and fix the locking in a minute. And the second thing I wanted to show you was one of the powerful things of Essence that I'm sure many of you are familiar with is the ability for Essence to be using the cards to play games. And for those games, when you play with a team or a squad, you can have much stronger insights than you might have by just handing out documents. So we put together a few games that you can play around the Spotify Essentials practice, and they're on this template that I'll put the link in the chat to as well. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with Mural, Mural has a concept of templates. So the first link I gave you is one which is a visitor link, so anybody can come and join that mural without any registration. What a template does is it allows you to have your own personal mural board with the contents of the template on it. What that means, of course, is you need a Mural account to be able to host your Mural canvas. Mural accounts are free, and you can sign up for one, and then you can use this template. And what this template gives you is a number of different things. So there's a little bit about the board at the top. It tells you about it. I've got some links and references. It's got the same cards that you can use, and then it's got a number of different games. There's 5 different games, and these games will help you do a variety of things. They'll help you understand the Spotify practice. They'll help you adopt it. They'll help you optimize it, and they'll help you improve it, and the different types of games. I won't walk you through them all because they're all described, and I could literally spend an hour just talking you through these games, but there's a couple that I wanted to draw your attention to. That first one we talked about, this is a version of that for planning your adoption. So there's quite a lot in the model. If you just try to do it all on day one, you might struggle. So how are you going to adopt the different elements of the Spotify model? This is a way for you to workshop that with the team and map out things that you don't need to do because you're already doing them, no actions, things you want to start immediately, perhaps the next sprint, things that might be a little more medium term, and then maybe things you're not going to do at all. And the way this game works is, as a team, you take each element of the Spotify model and you just say, okay, squad health check, what are we going to do? Are we going to do it next or in the next 3 to 4 sprints? And then you have a conversation, you decide when you're going to start implementing that bit. And after the workshop, which probably will take you half an hour, you'll have a plan and some actions for how you can begin your journey towards adopting the Spotify model. The second game I want to show you, and I'll leave the others for you to look at yourself, it's the one which is probably the one that demonstrates essence most. And I'll show you another way to do this in a second, which is easier, but this is on the Mural board as well. And this is about building your own Spotify model. So as Joachim says, every implementation of Spotify will be different. Teams will choose different things, they'll choose different practices, they'll choose different elements, they'll use different cadences, they'll rename things differently. This is a way to describe what you're going to do in your tribe or your squad. And it talks you through kind of 4 stages. The first stage is to say, let's make sure we understand those core beliefs properly, and let's think about how we will implement those, how we'll embody those beliefs in our practices. The second part uses the essence activity spaces to say, okay, well, let's think a little bit about what practices we are going to use. And this is where essence really helps. We've got a whole load of practices that you can pick and choose from. And even within a practice, you can pick and choose elements. The third section then is, do you know what, there's some stuff that we might choose to not do now, but we want to make sure we remember it, especially if we're beginning a scaling journey. Lots of those scale things we might not need to do straight away. Release planning, product envisioning, adaptive planning, things like that. But we might want to capture that, we want to remember them. And then, as Joachim said, every model is wrong the second you hit save. So what are you going to do about coming back to correct it? So how are you going to review your way of working? What's going to trigger you to look at it again? Let's think about that. So you might decide maybe it's time trigger or a team trigger. And the final thing I want to show you is we've got a tool that can really help you do some of this, which is a team space product, Essence in Practice Team Space. You can sign up. There's a link here to sign up that you can get a free account on it. It's quite a new tool, and it's one that is still being developed. So forgive there might be the odd bug. It's being updated every few days, as you would expect. And the second link will take you to the product, but you then need to have an account to log in. The first link takes you through a sign-up process. I want to show very quickly this, because again, this is a complex tool that we could spend a long time talking about. This top left icon will always take you back here. The top right is my account, and I can get to things we call team rooms. To begin with, though, on the front page, you can do one of these 3 things. You can jump straight into explore the practice. You can play a game around inspecting your core beliefs, and you can play that game at building your own Spotify. So if I click on the explore the practice, what that does is it takes me straight into this view. And this is a view, this shows the power of the tool. So this is the same sort of view that Stefan showed. What's nice though, is I just need to click on any one of these things, and this window on the left updates with that practice. So I can find out what empower and trust really means. I can read about the tribe leadership team. And then these hexagons at the bottom are all those different practices that we've talked about. So I can click on one of those, let's say Scrum, and now I can see what the Essence Scrum practice is all about. And I can click on that, and I can read all about Scrum, and I can browse through, and I can jump back to either Spotify, which is the green one, or one of the others. So this is a really nice way to explore it all. And if I click on the practices here, that also brings them up. So this is exploring all the things. So this is if you want to say, well, I don't know which ones I want to do. I don't know how I want to use all of, for example, in this case, product ownership, or maybe I just want to do 2 or 3 of those activities. And this gets you into the kind of essence element of it. And the final bit is, if we jump back to this build your own Spotify, this is where you can actually start becoming a bit more creative about it. So you're then making that decision about which practices to use, which ones not to use. And this then gives you, if we drag these things onto this board, it gives you that documentation of your practice that Joachim talked about as being important, but not necessarily that common. And it's a really nice way, if you've got teams being onboarded, to talk people through how you work in your team and your squad. I'll show you an example of one that's a little bit more populated. So I've gone up here to the top right to click on my team rooms. I've got a room called that, and I've just populated a little bit more. So I've dragged in some things that we might do about embodying the beliefs. I've dragged in some practices here that I think we'll run in our squad. I've picked some of the actual elements of practice, so documents we'll produce or events that we'll have, and I've dropped them onto the Essence activity spaces. And I can immediately at a glance see, I probably need to think a little bit about how I test and operate the system, because I've not got much going on there. A bit more on stakeholder benefits realization and monitoring the satisfaction, but I'm doing quite a lot around shaping and requirements. So that's there for you to use. You can use those 2 links. The tool is relatively self-explanatory, but the key things probably are, you can get back to start at the top left, and these hexagons here will bring up a different practice on the left that you can then click through and explore. And if you get lost, you can just click back on the practice down there, or the back button works. So very, very quick run through, but hopefully you've now got some materials that you can use to actually spend some of your own time absorbing the work that Joachim and Stefan have done.
Thank you so much, Simon. That was fascinating. A whistle-stop tour of Mural and TeamSpace. So that is how we can put some of that into practice, which is really great to see. Just a quick shout out to our next meetup event while we're in the moment. If you enjoyed some of what you saw from Simon, our next event will be to explore Essence a bit more deeply in how we can and how it supports teams. So I've just sent you the link in the meetup in the Zoom chat. So Simon will be doing more of what he just showed you, essentially from a team perspective, to show how Essence can support that. So if you like that, click the link and sign up. So that's the next event, but staying with this one because we're not finished yet. Thank you so much to everyone who has just, to Stefan, Joachim, and Simon for walking us through that. The audience, I'm sure you guys have some questions. So why don't we spend the next 5 or 10 minutes answering some questions from you? Feel free to raise your hand or write it in chat if you have a question. I can see there's already been a few. Tom Gilb, I think you sent me a couple questions. You were one of the first people to do so. Would you like to unmute and ask one of your questions, perhaps? Or I can ask one on your behalf, if not.
I'm here. So I like to know comparative data for the productivity and costs of any methods we're comparing. And I haven't heard anything about it yet here. Is there some source, like some university that studied these and compared them and published a paper, or any other data from Spotify? That was the first question. The second question is, to what degree is Spotify's success due to the Spotify model, or are there other factors in play, such as great leadership of the corporation?
I actually had there's someone who needs to mute, I think. There's a woman who is speaking. Not sure who. So I didn't really hear the first question, unfortunately, Tom. But I can try to answer the second one to start with, and we'll see if we can get the first one again. So it's of course always difficult to say, did Spotify succeed because of or in spite of the Spotify model? But what I can tell you is that we had from the employee surveys that we did, from the researchers that did the employee value propositions and so on, it was very clear to us that it attracted a lot of people, this way of working, and many people connected their engagement and their ability to thrive at Spotify to this culture and autonomy. We can also point to interviews from the CEO and conversations with him that most of the great ideas that were successful at Spotify, like Discover Weekly, for instance, one of the most loved features, came out of Hack Week and innovation. And there's a story, it's probably recorded somewhere. I've done a talk on Discover Weekly that shows, even the CEO didn't like what they were doing. They didn't give them any more headcount, any more funding. The designers said it's the wrong way to do it. The architect said it will never scale. But because of this culture of autonomy and empowerment and so on, and because of the way of working and the tooling supporting to actually, try and test our ideas, and that's the merit that decides what gets done and what doesn't get done, and not the hippo, highest paid person's opinion, actually brought ideas to life that would have been killed if in companies that didn't do something similar to Spotify model.
Thanks. Very, very good and interesting answer. My first question was, are there any measures of the productivity and or costs of the Spotify model compared to anything else? Even earlier versions of the model would be interesting.
Not that I know of, unfortunately. No, sorry. But yeah, that would be interesting.
Great, thank you so much for the Q&A there. I'll summarize a couple of questions because two people asked the question in a similar way. So what are some of the top challenges that you've observed when implementing the Spotify model, and how did you overcome it? And another person had a very similar question. Why did Spotify give up on this model? What are the pitfalls that should be considered when trying it out?
Yeah, it's a kind of a big questions, but try to be brief. I actually did a keynote at the Lean Agile Exchange last year that was a little bit cheeky, called "So you copied the Spotify model. This is what you got wrong." And I brought up 3 patterns that I see. One is that I call lipstick on a pig, which is basically just, we renamed teams to squads and departments to tribes, and you can now wear jeans to work all week, not only casual Friday. And wow, we're really cool. We're Spotify model, and that's of course not going to give you any of the benefits from Spotify model. And some ways of actually overcoming that. Well, that's using it in the way it's intended with and this is why I believe that the publishing of these 5 core beliefs is so important. Really focusing on we're all in this together, integrating business and IT through mission-based tribes, for instance, and really develop and sustain tribal unity, the sense of team in team of teams that is a tribe. One thing that we started capturing with the tribe gathering and tribe kickstart, for instance. Another one is a sausage factory. That I call that pattern or anti-pattern, which is, we introduced the Spotify model, but it's still, we treat IT or technology or engineering or whatever as a sausage factory, and it's someone else or is ordering things from that sausage factory and expecting good things to get out of it, and basically treating it as a black box. And what you really have to do is empower your people and leverage the innovation and creativity of empowered product teams, or you won't get much out of the model. Similar to the points in the answer to my last question. And the third anti-pattern I would say is the cheap mercenary. So you still believe that we can outsource or have low costs in IT and or cheap resources and so on. But once you start to catch on that this is about developing people, and we need our people to be committed and understand what we're doing. And those are the ones who need to innovate and come up with ideas, which means that we need to spend effort in developing our people. Is it going to be our outsourced or offshored partners that we're going to invest time in developing? So expect to insource maybe, or at least think more creatively about how can you build an engineering culture and really build your own capability in when it comes to developing software. And just lastly, the other question, which was kind of related, but I'm not sure that Spotify has abandoned this model. Sure, the chapter lead thing, we changed a little bit. There are now also engineering managers at Spotify that has led some people say not even Spotify is using the chapter lead model. But it depends on, it's not like, wow, we've discovered a new thing at Spotify which invalidates all the things. But the newest thing is always going to be better. And if you learn what Spotify is doing right now, you can shortcut to the latest and greatest. No, in the beginning, Spotify needed chapters and chapter leads to really develop this servant leadership, people development mentality. But when you've been doing that for 5 years, it's so ingrained in your culture. Now maybe the pendulum has swung too far. Now you want to try something else, another practice, another way of approaching it. Maybe have a team lead or a tech lead instead of a chapter lead, but that's more compensating for where you ended up. And this is with leaders who have now 5 years of experience in this culture being people developers. So it's more, where are we right now, adapting it to context and optimizing it rather than abandoning it or anything like that.
Thank you so much for the answers. I appreciate that. Was a tough question to summarize. Jonathan Bartholomew, you messaged me with a question. Would you like to take the opportunity to ask it? Otherwise, I can ask on your behalf.
I'll give it a go. So for those of us on the call whose point of reference, for better or for worse, is SAFe, Skilled Agile Framework. And I can tell you that it's Ivar Jacobson and Ian Spence and Brian Tucker who are to blame for it. For those of us who have that point of reference, I'm curious to really understand more about how this refreshing alternative, this model, Spotify, how it diverges and is different from what SAFe is bringing to the market. Is it mutually exclusive? Is it a competitive alternative, or is it really something that, with some care, can be complementary?
Right. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I happen to be a certified SAFe program consultant, and I participated in my share of SAFe implementations, as it's a little bit strangely called, but let's say uses of SAFe, and I find that it's a really great toolbox, and I often recommend a lot of the practices of it. It's more in how some companies have implemented it, and some of the material lends itself to more easily interpret it in a bad way, I think personally. But there's no opposition between a SAFe and Spotify model. I think that for an organization that's transforming, I think there are a lot of good practices and ways of doing that through SAFe. But if you stay with some of the things that SAFe suggests, then maybe Spotify model could actually help you, inspire you to go a little bit further. And for instance, I would say that SAFe is really, really great at you have these monoliths and this old legacy organization, and you need to start managing dependencies, building relations and collaboration between different parts of the organization, and build these stable teams. Okay, but now when you're up and running and have that, maybe how about actually trying to work away these dependencies, get more autonomy, more empowerment into it? Then Spotify can give you away. Maybe the virtual organization of a dual operating system, that you don't have to change your org structures, but you can still work across the value stream. That can be a really great transformation path. but sooner or later, that's going to end up constraining you or hurting you. And maybe it's time to look at what the Spotify model says, but actually the tribe is the same as the reporting structures, basically. And several of the patterns here can be immediately applied to your safe agile release trains. For instance, tribe gatherings and tribe kickstarts, to try to build this sense of team or tribal unity in a team of teams. I think that's a really great way of starting to get your agile release train to work more as a tribe and a cohesive unit, actually. So, and there are lots of others. I'm actually developing with a partner. I'm going to visit their leading safe training in 2 weeks in Vienna and do a half a day on this comparison safe and Spotify model. So I hope to be able to write something up actually and share it.
I would also argue both complement, but unless you have both models, let's say on something like Essence, yeah, it's really hard to combine and compare and so on.
Great, thank you so much for the insights, Jonathan. Hopefully your question was answered. I'll just check in with the speakers because we're at time in a few minutes. Are you okay for 1 or 2 more questions?
I think we should definitely bring up the announcements, yeah, so that we have also that included.
Let's do it then. You have something to tell us, I take it, Stefan?
So where to start? You have seen the cards, you have seen the mural boards, and we decided to release the Spotify Essentials practice. As you can see here, there is a site, PDX, Practice Exchange, Ivar Jacobsen, and so on. And on the site, you can basically find the cards. You can navigate around here, you can download the cards. That is basically the structure we introduced at the very beginning of this meetup. But we would also like to get you on board and get involved. Yeah? So you would like to know from you. So what we have described here, is this according to your view, the Spotify model? Do we miss something? Yeah? Are we wrong with something here? So we would like to facilitate and trigger a discussion around that. And we would like to do that in the Essence for Agility group here on LinkedIn. That might not be the best way forward from a true perspective, but we would like to start here. And as there were also some questions about the links, of course, we will combine and collect all the relevant links and put them in the meetup chat afterwards. So that's the starting point. You have the cards here. Simon shared also the mural boards and also this option to explore the TeamSpace product. So I would say you can start tomorrow adopting, analyzing, yeah, the Spotify model.
Why not today?
Or right after the meeting.
Remember, we've got someone in Australia, so it's their morning. They're about to start their day. What better way to start the day with than this? So is that everything you wanted to share with us, Stefan? I'm just quickly checking.
Yes, I think those are the most important points, and we will share, of course, all the links, put them in some sort of collection, yeah, that you have everything at hand.
Perfect. So I know we didn't get around to all of the questions, but the LinkedIn forum is a great place to redirect some of this conversation, and I'm sure Joachim and Stefan and others will help to answer the questions. I'm going to check in with Ivar because he's been uncharacteristically silent.
Sorry, can I just add one thing? I really want to emphasize what Stefan was saying on the community involvement. So we view ourselves, as I said initially, we're more like curators of the Spotify model. I want to put maybe some stamp of approval on if you don't want to use these core beliefs, if you don't believe in empowerment and trust, then I won't agree that it's not the Spotify model. But other than that, if you're using have adopted the Spotify model in some meaningful way out there in the field, and you're doing it in a different way, or you're choosing these practices, and it turns out there are dozens of or hundreds of people who are, we don't have a tribe leadership team, we have this instead. That we would love to hear more about that, and let you co-evolve and build this community together, because there is no, Spotify doesn't care about this. To the extent they do, they would rather, no, we're about music streaming, don't use her brand. So we would like to see this to be a community effort. We have no idea what the engagement is, and maybe there's not a lot of interest, but if there is interest to continue the conversation, I'm posting the link now to the LinkedIn group, and I would love to see more of you come in there and continue the discussion.
Okay, I don't think there is much more to add. I personally think it's been a fantastic meetup with a lot of substance, and it's very interesting to see how this will move forward with many other practices that we will see and hear about soon. So thank you guys, very good.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, this is the part where I do my awkward online virtual applause. Please feel free to join me, and if you would like, give our lovely speakers a few rounds of applause. There we go. Okay, it gets more awkward every time. It's fascinating.